Hello, everybody. Welcome to Strategy and Future. My name is Jacek Bartosiak, and today my guest is General Ben Hodges. Hello, General. Hello, Ben.
Jacek, good morning, sir.
Ben Hodges is a former commander of U.S. Army Europe and now a senior advisor to Human Rights First. As you well know, frequent commentator on warfare, on war in Ukraine, on events across Eurasia, actually, because sometimes you also comment on the Asia Pacific and Western Pacific contingencies. We are recording our conversation on the 18th of January, 2023. So let's get started with a quite obvious question. So where are we right now? In terms of war in Ukraine, and what are your predictions in terms of the winter campaign?
So I think right now we're in a phase where Ukraine is preparing for the next mobile phase of this campaign. Their counteroffensive that started back in September is still happening, but we've been in a lull, of course, because they had to adjust to Russia's infusion of untrained Mobics and people and intensive fighting up in the northeastern part of Ukraine. But they also needed to train and prepare for this next offensive phase. And so I think what we're seeing and what I would predict is that probably within the next 2 or 3 months, Ukraine is going to launch an attack in the direction of Mariupol. And the purpose of all of this is to sever the connections between Crimea and Russia. Crimea is the decisive ground here. That's what matters the most. Ukrainian General Staff knows this. And I think they see now that they can hold pretty much, they can stop a Russian breakthrough up in the northeastern region. They have to be prepared or alert to the possibility of a new Russian offensive coming out of the north or out of Belarus, but I think those are unlikely. So what they've done, which requires real nerves of steel, is resist the urge to push every new piece of equipment, every new weapon, every new unit into the meat grinder and hold with what they've got so that they can build up, train an armored force that will be able to regain the momentum on the ground. And the last piece of this is the importance of long-range precision weapons. There's so much talk about tanks right now, and that is important. That will be important for this armored formation that I talked about. But there are only 2 land lines of communication that connect Crimea to Russia. One is the Kerch Bridge. The other is the so-called land bridge that runs from Rostov through Mariupol and Melitopol. They've already hit Kerch Bridge, and I'm sure they'll hit it again. They'll want to prevent Russia from repairing it. The land bridge has already been hit, vicinity Melitopol. So if the West were to provide more long-range precision weapons, then Ukraine could already be disrupting both LOCs. And the goal of the land force and those air-delivered capabilities that I just mentioned is to isolate Crimea. Crimea starts looking more and more like a trap. And eventually, it becomes untenable for Russian forces, and they're compelled to leave. I think that can happen by the end of the summer.
So you are known for being optimistic from the point of view, of course, of the Ukrainian victory. So how do you support this argument? So of course, Poland would be very much happy about this outcome, but still there are many in the West that don't see it that way. So
yeah, well, I think that's because many in the West, including even in the Pentagon, are still looking at the idea that, or having a hard time grasping the idea that big Russia could actually be defeated. Okay, that's a part of it. The second part is I think most of their estimations think only in sort of linear terms of, having to fight through all these trenches and Russian defenses in the southern part of Ukraine, or that somehow Ukraine has to attack along the entire front. They don't. I mean, this is the importance of identifying what is decisive, and what is decisive is Crimea. Ukraine will never be safe, secure, or able to rebuild its economy as long as Russia sits on Crimea. So that's why I think that the Ukrainians, if they are able to isolate Crimea through long range fires and through ground attack and through making the Russian rear area a pure hell for logisticians and headquarters and truck drivers, then they will be in a position where they can bring up enough HIMARS and other long range systems to hit Sevastopol, Shankoy, Saki, all those very vulnerable facilities and locations on the Crimean Peninsula so that it becomes untenable. The Russians can't stay there. The key, of course, and the vulnerability of my assessment is that it does depend on continued Western support and the eventual delivery of precision weapons. I'm talking about ATACMS,
Yeah,
uh, small diameter bombs, the kind of things that can reach beyond what the GMLRS does right now.
yeah. That's a pivotal thing. Uh, I will ask you, just shortly, why there is so hesitancy to deliver such things to Ukraine, and I wonder what your opinion is. But before we do that, I understand that your assumption is that the Russian mobilization and inserting Mobics into the lines is not working. Yes, as it might have worked in the 20th century or something. What is your assessment of the mobilization system of the Russian Federation, and will it change the battlefield?
One of the things that I overestimated before last February was the size of actual Russian forces. They didn't have as many people already in uniform as they had said and as we thought. And the other thing, I overestimated their mobilization system. What has been exposed, and this was first brought to my attention by a retired Finnish general who, would understand this better than most. He said that there was so much corruption that they don't have the equipment. What they do have is not properly prepared. They don't, all the things that go into mobilization requires accountability and preparation. None of that has existed. So that's why we have all been watching videos over the last several months of these extremely unhappy people, the ones who were not clever enough to get out of Russia back in September, being handed old rusty equipment, improper uniforms, poor quality body armor, and of course they are constantly exposed to bad weather. They're not properly trained or led. So the first mobilization back in September was a total cluster, and yet it still did provide tens of thousands of bodies that could be used as literally as cannon fodder. And that's what we saw around Zoledar and Bakhmut, that they're willing to suffer hundreds of casualties every day because they don't care about, what they're losing. That did have an effect, obviously. I mean, the Ukrainian soldiers still had to kill them. Um, but that's but what the Russians have done up around Soledar and Bakhmut is um, not the kind of thing that's going to represent a major breakthrough. I mean, they have no forces that can exploit, like they somehow penetrated Ukrainian defenses and now they can, drive on towards Kiev or Kharkiv or, that's there's nothing there. Um, and I have not seen, of course, I could be totally wrong, but I have not seen evidence that they have fixed all their problems in the mobilization system. And now they're going to add another 100, 200, 500,000, whatever the number is, to this burden of feed, equip,
Yeah,
accommodate, move. Who are the sergeants that are training these soldiers? Who are the officers that are going to lead their formation? I mean, all of these kind of things. It'll be a threat, but it's not the kind of thing that's going to, I think, change the outcome of the war. And the Ukrainian General Staff, I think, knows that. They have seen that, and so they're going to be able to hold that as they continue to focus on the main effort, which I think should be the main effort, which is Crimea.
Hmm. Perfect. And what are your after 10 months of war? What are your major observations in terms of the evolution of the warfare as a a very seasoned, experienced army commander? Uh, what was most surprising, or maybe you were expecting this, the battlefield to look like that? What are the trends that emerge at the battlefield? I'm asking in particular because, as you know, we're on the verge of the major modernization of the Polish forces, so the debate is heated here.
Yeah.
And we should focus on something that really bring results in the future, in the wars that might be coming soon. So, what do you think?
Well, two or three things that I think are obvious that most people will recognize and agree. The amount of ammunition consumption is so far beyond anything I've ever experienced or even thought about. I mean, it's staggering the amount of artillery ammunition, mortar, anti-tank, rockets, missiles. It's staggering amounts. So, are we prepared for that? I would say no. But that has been an eye opener, and also probably a surprise to many on how long it takes to change industry, to get industry to ramp up production if there has not been a demand signal. The second thing is uh, you still have to have uh, mass, hard power. I mean, the soft power didn't work. The constant negotiations, all of these different kinds of things. It's only the threat of the use of force that can bring about a decisive outcome. So, as the Sakir says, hard power is back. You've got to have real combat power, capable, trained, ready combat power. That means tanks, armored fighting vehicles, artillery, rocket launchers, aircraft, ships, anti-ship capabilities. That stuff is an essential component of deterrence. And if you don't have it, you're never going to have peace. I mean, we just know this from thousands of years of history. We just have to unfortunately be reminded. The third thing has been a reminder of the importance of hard training, where you train to the point of failure, to find where the mistakes are. If you conduct an exercise where there's no mistakes made, or you don't put pressure on the systems until you find out where that failure point is, then you'll never identify it and you'll never fix it. So the importance of readiness. When I look at what Russia has failed to do, thankfully, they still have not come up with a coherent command structure. I mean, they're constantly changing it around, moving it around, and they still do not have a joint effects on the battlefield. I mean, there's almost no day that I've seen where you've got Russian Air Force supporting Russian ground forces in a joint effort. The famous Black Sea Fleet, where is it? I mean, zero amphibious operations along
Yeah.
the the exposed coastline of Ukraine. The Black Sea Fleet hides. They're terrified of Ukrainian anti-ship capability. So these are the things that have really uh, gotten my attention.
Mm. And why do you think the West, you know, generally speaking, because the countries vary depending on its aspirations or capabilities or even will, why the weapon deliveries are piecemeal? I mean, why? What do you think? What is your assessment of
Yeah,
this?
this has been so frustrating. I mean, I have been proud of our administration and so many other Western leaders that have stuck together now almost 11 months, um, and spent a lot of money. A lot of things have been provided, but they have stopped short of saying we want Ukraine to win. They can't, for some reason, they just can't say that that's the aim is for Ukraine to win. And I think this goes to an exaggerated assessment that Russia can still escalate somehow, um, do something that would turn this into a direct conflict with NATO, a third world war, or nuclear use of a nuclear weapon. I think, of course, you have to take that risk, that threat seriously, because the Russians do have thousands of nuclear warheads. They clearly do not care how many innocent people are killed. But I think that the general staff and people in the Kremlin actually do believe President Biden when he said that there would be catastrophic consequences. And I think the people around Putin also were thinking, there will be life after him, but they'll never get back to what they want if Russia uses a nuclear weapon. So it would be basically a suicidal effort that yields no battlefield advantage for Russia. So that's why I think it is so unlikely that they would do it. And China has signaled, do not do this.
Yes.
And so I think the reason we have been so incremental, the U.S., Germany, some other Western countries, um, is because of this exaggerated fear of how Russia might escalate. Actually, Russia's nuclear weapons are only effective as long as they don't use them. Once they use them, then it's over.
Yeah, it's true. It's only a political blackmail. Actually, it's not a military weapon. And so, do you think that this behavior of the Western countries will change over time in 2023? This exaggeration will sort of, subside, and the Ukrainians will get more weapons and in mass.
Well, that's what's been happening, of course. If you think back to the beginning, there were debates about whether or not we should provide Stinger.
Yeah, yeah, I remember.
I mean, it's unbelievable. And now here we are, Patriot, HIMARS, all sorts of anti-air missiles, Bradleys, Marder, Challenger tanks. So it feels like the dam is about to break open on
Yeah,
tanks. And of course, with the meeting of the Ramstein contact group on Friday, it's a chance for the new German defense minister to kind of establish himself as a serious figure within the German government and within the alliance. And hopefully, Germany will use this as an opportunity to, at a minimum, release Poland and Norway and the Netherlands and others who have Leos, to let them hand them over if they want to. It does feel like that's coming. I hope that we may hear an announcement about weapons like small diameter bomb, which is a very good weapon system with long range precision. Hopefully that'll be announced here this week. But the ones that really, really will make a gigantic difference, I think, would be like ATACMS.
yeah,
That's the one that I'm really hoping for soon. I don't hear anything that's going to come out this month. Um, this part is, I think the administration is so worried that Ukraine will launch an ATACMS deep into Russia to hit an airfield, for example, and that's why they hold out. I think this is terrible. Every week, innocent Ukrainian people are being killed by weapons that are being launched from inside Russia, inside Belarus, as well as from
yeah.
uh, Crimea. We have in effect created sanctuary for Russia
Yes,
by
exactly.
limiting the range of what we give.
Exactly, that's the case. And especially given the way that the Russian force operate with the logistical centers close to the front line and with the problems with the logistical tail, trucks and so on. So they always tend to keep headquarters and stuff close. So with ATACMS, you can really destroy it's a center of gravity, of their operations. Yeah.
Very good. That's exactly right. I agree with you completely. The Ukrainian general staff has been, because they understand the Russians' organization and how they do things, they have focused on headquarters, which is important. If you've got a force that does not have a good decentralized command and control, and especially if they're not well trained, then you've got to have headquarters close by. So every time you hit a headquarters, it dramatically reduces the effectiveness of these formations and the logistics. Obviously, we're talking specifically about artillery ammunition. Without artillery, then massed infantry especially the untrained type, is not going to be effective. And so, going after artillery ammunition, transportation network, and headquarters is, in fact, the key. Setting the conditions for Ukraine's offensive, which I think will begin in the next 2 or 3 months.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Thank you, General. That was awesome. That was great. Now I'm looking forward to hearing, having a chance to talking to you soon after maybe the successful Ukraine offensive. Hopefully, that was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.